Welcome to TradeNMDI.com. This is John. This report is for the 15th of August in Italy. It's called Ferragosto, middle of summer. And, well, middle of summer caused a little bit of turmoil here. So we've been seeing this fight back and forth within the broader short that we had witnessed from one of the peaks up here in the 3,000 range. And once we got over the 50%, we're like, oh, we could be long over the 50%, even though we were in a relatively weak position. And then it was above the 61. So below that, we were like, well, you've got to be prepared to flip the opposite way. We dipped down to the 50. Found support on the fact that green was rising above cyan. That should have helped maintain itself, except for we were seeing falling here of short-term buyers. They had kind of used their early money wad, and then we had that little short cover rally that was talking about from the idea that perhaps there was going to be a softening with China and that, but I think that was just an opportunity for them to start liquidating into that short covering. And once there was no more short covering, that's what happens. The market takes a major move back down, and it still wasn't as big as this previous dip, and we still haven't even broken the lows from before, but we're right down to them, and literally you can see that roll over there. It's not quite what we look for when we get like a spider where it happens like immediately, like over here where you get the crossover above, boom, and then instantaneous is taking a little bit longer. And I think that was the short cover above the 50% Morganacci line that we had. Not a big deal. Pretty clean from the 2922, and from a 50K standpoint, the 50K ES chart here of the S&P. That was right around that same point. We had 2920 range. We had started to get some DOC spreads just about, well, the first one occurred right there. That was just under 20. Happened again right over here. This one was near 30. And the coup de grace of where it just really gave a strong separation. Of course, you had the reset, but the problem was it took so long before it finally crossed above cyan that you still had falling magenta, so that's not going to be a buy consideration at that point. And then even after it's based now here with the P2s and that, rising momentum just rolled over pretty darn quick, and that's because no steel reset. So that's always the problem without having that reset. Your pops don't tend to have as much oomph to them, and they tend to fade, which that's why we love looking at that, because it really is a nice portend to what to expect. We can already see that the NASDAQ is still performing better in general. The euro is still trying to hold on. The U.S. really wants this to remain higher than it is. The problem is the eurozone is in a world of hurt, and trying to balance those two is quite the enormity, because as much as the Fed can buy euros, there's plenty of people who want to buy dollars instead. So I'll go figure. And of course, there's all the talk of the world, the global recession, blah, 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 blah. Of course, how convenient right before the election is supposed to start up. But it's like they're trying to talk themselves into it, because things have otherwise been performing fairly decently. Here we have oil just maintaining itself. Now, if there were zero production activity going on, you would see oil plummet much lower than it is. That's going to be the benchmark for us, because if you see a plummet in oil, then you'll have the real expectation that not enough demand would be because of economic slowdown. So that's something to keep an eye out. The fact that now we get the results that China has bolstered by some massive percentage their increased gold holdings, not a surprise. We kind of projected that way back, well, a while ago, that they had been doing that on a regular basis, and no shock there. They really need to wean themselves of dollars and treasuries, simply because they want to not be beholden to the U.S., but they really don't have much choice. So it's this is why I find that trade war thing kind of funny, because the U.S. really does hold most of the cards. It's just a question, do they have the backbone to do it politically? So going back from the other day, and I had to shrink this chart, it shows you how much volume there was. I mean, on a 5K to have it go that small. We had ourselves right back up here again, like same with the 50K. These were up in the just shy of the 2930 range, and I had shown those because I had shorted right around the middle point, and then again I kept doing it as I continue to see the breakdown. We were expecting the 2905 at that particular point back below. And again, no steel resets on these. So when you see these pops come in without a no reset, you got to be cautious with them, because you know that the potential is that they're not going to have a whole lot of oomph to them. And in this case, the buy is still at a reasonable point. It just never really catches fire. And you know, it's one of those where I look at it from two sides. If I want to stay short from a long standpoint, I'm using about the 50% as a stop, falling as I trail it down. If I get a significant buy signal, maybe I dip to a 38, unless it's like corresponding to a algo level like this, in which case you need to be above it, because it's likely that it'll attract right to it. So it wasn't until that broke below that you then had the 2880, and once you get to the 2880, it was like, okay, you can kind of follow the 50% at that particular point. What you have to watch for in doing that, though, is when these ranges become so narrow, because it just isn't, it's not catching a bid or anything. It's still producing higher DOC red because there's enough supply buying up what's being sold. But the fact that you're not moving to the 100% means you've got some serious amount of selling still happening. And at this point, you finally did get your steel reset right here. So this one had potential, and it was the closest. It almost came right up to the 50% before steel crossing below cyan right there, and then the breakdown of green below red, and then it just kind of rolled over. And you'll notice that barely ever got close to the zero, was right here with this move to the 50%, which tends to happen quite frequently. And then it just became a garbled mess in the decline. Slide back just a fraction more for that one. As we get into pre-market action already today is still weak. So once we were below the algo of the 2870, we had 47 down below. It came right to it immediately, and then the one right below that was at the 39 level, which pretty much is what generated the lows right through here. And again, pretty decent mobility with both up and down. I predominantly just stayed short through the whole thing because I really didn't expect anything to come back in a pronounced way. There was nothing on the daily or even in the 50K chart that suggested we were going to get a turnaround, a major effect. But still coming off the lows, I mean, someone who's trading these as little individual pops, you know, you have room to take, you know, decent runs. I mean, this is, you know, over 15 points to the upside just from a midpoint. So there's still a lot of activity within the general move. We ended up never getting here anything that looked like magenta over 15-point level. So all these DOC spreads could have taken, they caught bids really quickly each time coming back up. I was more interested right here where we had the Azure meeting gold at the first one. That one started to pop back up pretty quickly, but it created very shallow lower histogram as we were approaching near the highs, made for an easy additional entry, and then that's the one that just has plummeted all the way down to exactly our 2817 before, and we're hitting resistance right at this 2830 previous level that we had. So again, you know, it's amazing, but we hit these extreme histogram algo spots quite often, and they tend to have more market influence than Fibonacci's and these other things that come in here. We see a lot of confluence when we get one of the lines corresponding to a key Morganacci. They'll tend to fluctuate quite a bit on them. So all good stuff. Another nice month to start out with. This thing's been impressive with the ranges, so pretty exciting. As always, though, trade well, and we will certainly talk to you later.